Hello. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Carrie, and this is the very first episode of a brand new podcast called Key Finding. I'm really, really happy to have you listening in, and I have to be honest and tell you I'm also a little bit nervous, but excited to see how this podcasting journey goes for me and for you as well. In this first episode today, what I want to do is talk with you a little bit about myself, who I am, and what this podcast is going to be about. We are going to be taking this journey together throughout the episodes of the podcast, so I figured a good place to start would be getting a little bit personal and talking with you about who I am, how I came to be here, and hopefully giving you a little more of a feel for the person that you'll be spending some time with as you listen to future episodes of the podcast. A few years ago, I found myself in this place where I had done everything that I thought I was supposed to do in my life. So I had gone to college and graduated with my bachelor's degree. I had gotten my first job in the real world in corporate America. And it suddenly dawned on me that I did not know for the first time in my life what was to come next. Before this point in my life, there was always some somewhat clearly defined idea of what I should be investing my time and energy in, be that going to school or obtaining employment, all of the things that I essentially went ahead and did. So I got to this point where I had done the things I was supposed to do, and I looked around at my life and I thought, there has to be something more. There's something missing for me. Things feel flat. I was extremely lacking this sense of meaning and magic in my life. I described it at the time as feeling like my life and the world around me and my inner world was like this endless plate of mashed potatoes. There was no interesting textures. There was no interesting flavors. It felt very monotonous, and it felt just not as interesting and multifaceted as I wished that it perhaps could be. Even before this point in my life, I never was what you could consider to be maybe a completely traditional or completely rationally minded person. I always had a tendency towards magical thinking. And I know sometimes people use that term magical thinking in a derogatory way, but for me, it's always been a really powerful thing and a trait about myself that I've held very dearly. And as I reached this point of feeling stagnant and having this mashed potato life, what began to emerge for me is this inner knowing that I was sorely lacking that magic, that spark, that creativity that I wanted in my life. A couple of years before this point, I had had a tarot reading from a professional tarot reader while attending a fair at my college. And I remember at that point, I was majoring in early childhood education, and I planned to become a kindergarten teacher. When I sat down with this tarot reader, I remember him telling me that it seemed likely that I would have a change of course, that I would decide not to become a teacher, and that I would gravitate towards something much more original and much more creative, and something that was more kind of fiery and exciting. Lo and behold, not too long after I had that tarot reading, I did end up changing my major, and I did end up not becoming a teacher. So when I had reached this point of having my first job and feeling very stuck, I think something within me gravitated back towards what that tarot reader had told me, and I began to have this percolating thing going on under the surface of my conscious mind where I had this draw to tarot. That was interesting because I had really no no knowledge of tarot. I guess that's not true. I had a roommate and really good friend who was into tarot, and she would read my cards sometimes. And of course, I had had that one reading at the fair, but I had no true understanding of what the cards actually were, what they could be used for, anything like that. And I began feeling this, I guess in hindsight, I can say it was like an intuitive knowing that I needed to get myself a tarot deck. And so one day I called in sick to my job in the corporate world because I knew I needed a sort of spiritual reset day. And I went to a local metaphysical store and I bought my first tarot deck. Alongside the same time that this was happening, I was also undergoing a tremendous amount of creative growth, I guess you could say, in other ways. I had long wanted to be a writer. Pretty much my whole life, when I was a tiny, tiny child, I was a storyteller and I was drawn to writing and expressing myself in that way. But I became blocked for a long time. There was many, many, many years where I still felt this yearning to write, yet I was not writing. I wasn't really doing much of anything in terms of creative expression to a large degree. So, around the same time that I was drawn to purchase my first tarot deck, I also began working with a book called The Artist's Way. And you may or may not be familiar with this book. It's been largely influential on me, and it is essentially a self-directed course in becoming unblocked creatively. And I was very blocked creatively at this point in my life. So there was sort of this convergence happening in multiple ways in which I was drawn to tarot, and then I started working with The Artist's Way, and things started clicking into place for me. The main thing that started happening is I began aligning with this deeper understanding of myself, of my place in the universe, of the energies that were affecting me, both in an external sense, in terms of my outer world in the real world, and in a universal sense, in terms of more cosmic type things. And all of this sort of really, I mean, it sounds cliche, but all of this changed my life. Another influential thing that was going on for me around this same time is that I had recently been introduced to the works of both Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. Joseph Campbell is well known for his theory or his outline of what is called the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is essentially this pattern of story that unfolds in myths and religious texts and fiction writing throughout various cultures, various time periods. It's sort of this pattern that somehow seems to reflect something inherent about the human experience. So the exact manifestations of the hero's journey vary, but it's kind of this underlying pattern that sort of permeates the way that we understand what it means to be human. And that was very influential on me, as well as discovering Carl Jung. And in particular, at that time, I began learning about Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious. The idea, just all of this is very in a nutshell, by the way, with both of these things, but the theory of the collective unconscious essentially underlies the notion that we all have, first of all, our personal unconscious, so the unconscious that is, of course, specific to you. And then there is this deeper layer to the unconscious mind that is something that is universal across all human beings, and it sort of manifests itself again in the symbols and in the stories and in the myths and in the rituals that we become interested in and that speak to us as human beings. So all of these things, all of this kind of smorgasbord of ideas and concepts were all coming up, and it was really culminating in my burgeoning studies of tarot. I would say that tarot became a key for me. I did feel when I began understanding the cards and working with the cards, that something that had been latent within me was beginning to reemerge and was being unlocked through this key that I had serendipitously discovered. I think of tarot as essentially providing not a set in stone map, but more of a jumping off point, a jumping off map for each of us to understand our psyche, our place in the world, what energies affect us, and how we interact with those energies. And for me, having that map became essential to everything that has happened for me, both in my inner world and in my outer world since this point. Tarot has become this touchstone that I use and this framework that is always helping me explore what it is to be me and what it is to be human and what it is to live a meaningful life and how I can live a more effective and more meaningful life. So, in a nutshell, tarot for me has been this incredibly powerful key to my self-discovery. So after I had been working with the cards and exploring the cards a while on my own, eventually sometime later, much as I had that initial kind of intuitive guidance to purchase my first tarot deck, I had this intuitive guidance that the next step for me was to start a website and to start a business around tarot. So that is what I did. And again, you may be familiar with that if you've known me for a while online, but I have been running my business now it's 2017 as I'm recording this, and I've been doing my tarot work professionally for about a little over 3 years now. I think the reason I was drawn to work with tarot professionally, to do readings for other people, to do mentoring sessions with other people, and all of the work that I do now is because I saw firsthand how discovering that key for myself completely gave me the ability to reach this deeper way of living and this transformation, and to kind of bust through some of the things that had been keeping me really stuck and had been getting me kind of caught in this pattern of living in a way that was very constricted. So my aim with pretty much everything I do currently professionally is not to give other people answers through tarot, but to help people tap into their own keys through tarot, and to help people find a way to live in alignment with their own sense of expansion, their own sense of self-discovery and creativity, and really just living in a way that feels very meaningful for them. So that's a little bit of an idea of who I am, where I've been, where I'm coming from with all of this stuff that we'll be looking at together throughout these podcast episodes. So as you're already aware, the podcast is titled Key Finding. And the concept here is, I've already hinted at this in what we've talked about so far. The idea here is that there are so many different keys that can lead you to this sense of your own authenticity, to help you explore what it means for you to have this sense of self-actualization, keys for you to get unstuck, keys for you to learn about yourself and the world, keys for you to feel more fully alive, more in tune with yourself, more in tune with the universe. Tarot is just one of these keys, and to be more specific, tarot is multiple keys. There's so many ways to use tarot. We will all find our own various unique keys within the system of tarot. But for the purposes of this metaphor of what key finding means in terms of this podcast, it's really just about having this curious sense of exploration and giving yourself the opportunity to discover what keys are out there that you could utilize in your own unique way. Right now, to be honest with you, I'm not sure where exactly this podcast will go in the future. My hope, if I enjoy doing the podcast and if you enjoy listening to the podcast, is that I will eventually explore a wide variety of keys. Tarot is obviously a keystone of what I do and the lens in which I see the world, but there are so many other things out there in this vast experience of life that I think are interesting keys that I would be curious to explore potentially in the future on the podcast. So I'm really interested in various art forms. I'm actually really interested in science, believe it or not. There are so many things out there that can serve as keys, and I'm less interested in being dogmatic about it and finding one or two keys that are the end all be all. I'm more interested in, again, having this sense of curiosity as we go through this. So in the future, if this experiment goes well and if I continue doing the podcast, I hope to talk about a wide variety of keys, the underlying theme being any type of key that could be useful in your own journey of self-discovery. That being said, for the first group of episodes, I want to focus on the theme of tarot for self-discovery. So I'm kind of thinking of structuring this podcast in what you could call seasons, kind of like a TV show has seasons. And this first season is going to be, again, focused on that theme of tarot for self-discovery. So the first few episodes will really center on that idea. As I am creating these podcast episodes for you, I am setting the intention that they can be interesting for you no matter what your experience with tarot is. So if you are a total beginner, totally new to tarot, I think that listening to the upcoming episodes will be really relevant for you. It will give you hopefully some good foundation to start building your understanding of the system of tarot. And in particular, I hope that listening to these episodes will help you connect with how tarot can lend itself to your own self-discovery. Same is true if you are someone who already has some experience and a lot of knowledge in the system of tarot. I think that one kind of common thing I hear a lot of tarot readers say, and I find to be true for myself as well, is that there's truly no end to where you can take tarot and how much you can learn about tarot. There's never any right or wrong answers with tarot, so everything that you hear me talk about is simply coming from my perspective, and it is here and offered to give you something to think about and to allow you the opportunity to take from what I say what works for you and to go ahead and leave the rest behind. But again, no matter if you have just discovered tarot, just stumbled into it, or if you've been at this game for a while, I hope that you will find something in these episodes to spark you, to deepen your relationship with your cards. I also want to mention, going back a little bit to what I was talking about earlier with my story and how I came to tarot and what tarot has done for me, that I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's no one thing out there that is like a magic bullet, right? Tarot has given me so many opportunities for transformation, and when I think back to that place I was in that I described as the mashed potato experience of life, I really do feel like tarot has helped me step out of that and helped me expand into something more magical. But tarot, again, it's not a magic bullet. And I think one of the things that I like so much about tarot, and one of the reasons that I think tarot lends itself so well to giving us guidance and helping us learn about ourselves, is that tarot is dynamic. Tarot speaks to all aspects of the human experience, the dark and the light. Sometimes when we are in a place where we're having maybe like that mashed potato experience that I referred to earlier, we want something to come along and just like solve it for us and just change everything automatically. But what tarot does, I think, really effectively is it challenges us and directs us towards our own inner knowing about what we need to do to create transformation. Tarot is particularly well versed in tapping us into ourselves and tapping us into things that maybe we actually already know on some deep intuitive level, but are not yet accessible to our conscious mind. I often think of tarot as a bridge between your unconscious intuitive knowing and your conscious everyday waking mind. Working with tarot can help you plug into that wordless knowledge, that collective unconscious that I talked about earlier. It can make those things accessible to your conscious mind. And instead of giving you a direct answer, I think what tarot does is give you clues and give you ways that you might go about finding those answers for yourself. I certainly feel that the way that my life is now is much more expansive and creative and multifaceted than that mashed potato experience that I was having a few years ago. But I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that living a meaningful life, that learning about ourselves is a lifelong process. There are always times in which we have setbacks, in which we circle around to old lessons, but we now view them in a deeper way. And all of these are universal truths that I think tarot speaks very strongly to. This kind of ties back into what I talked about earlier about my exploration of the hero's journey and the collective unconscious theories from Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. As I began working with tarot and as I've continued working with tarot, what I've realized is that tarot is yet another framework that outlines these universal hallmarks of the human experience. And the exact ways that we experience these universal hallmarks are different from you to me, and they're even different from myself depending on what exact experience I'm going through. You know, I might have an experience of the tower at one point in my life that manifests in a very specific way, and then a few years later, I may have a tower experience that looks completely different. So there are no set answers with tarot, and tarot is not there to take away your autonomy. Tarot, I think, is there to connect you in a deeper way with your own autonomy and your own ability to make choices and create a life that feels meaningful and rich to you. When I think back again to what I described about that mashed potato experience that I was having in my life, I realize now that a large part of why I was feeling that way is that I was intensely disconnected from a broader understanding of what it is to be alive. I was not plugged in to the underlying energies that I now see coming forward through my understanding of tarot and through considering things like the hero's journey and the collective unconscious. I was isolated from a deeper perspective of my life. And I also, as I had mentioned earlier, I think that in some ways I was wanting what we often want as human beings, which is for something or someone to come along and just tell us what to do. You know, I mentioned that before that point in my life, the next step had always been clearly defined for me by society. And even though I have always been someone who is, again, willing to a large degree, march to the beat of their own drummer, I had still very much followed what I was quote unquote supposed to do up until that point in my life. And tarot has given me the ability, or I should say, connected me with the ability that was always there for me to live life really and truly in a way that feels authentic for me, to step away from perhaps what society says should be my next step and to connect with my own sense of what the story of my life is, what the meaning is that is unfolding for me in each moment, and how I can best make choices and interact with those energies in order to live a life that feels truly expansive. A lot of what I've talked about so far has probably given you a pretty good understanding of my general tarot philosophies and how I work with tarot. And all of this will be hopefully really relevant as you listen to the remaining episodes. And I'm hoping that in this first episode, I have at least somewhat set the tone for how I view tarot as a tool. Some people have more of an association of tarot being used for fortune telling, of tarot giving you those direct answers, but my experience is quite different. And I know this is the way that many people are now working with tarot. It is more about exploring. It's more about looking at the whys and the hows, and it's more about connecting you to go deeper within yourself than it is about just telling you, hey, here's what's going to happen in your life. So as you listen to these podcast episodes, you will not hear me talk about making concrete predictions with tarot. You will not hear me talk about, predicting when you'll meet the love of your life or when you'll die or anything like that, because I'm not saying that there's no use or relevance for tarot as more of a tool for direct divination, but I think that what tarot, in the way that I view the system, is better equipped for is self-discovery and finding the answers within ourselves and doing the inner work that is sometimes very uncomfortable and very uncharted and very overwhelming, but that is what we need to do to reach the next level of expansion. If it so happens that you're listening to this and you've had a reading from me before, you've already heard me say that I believe humans are wired to create stories and to find meaning. That's what we do as humans. We're storytellers. We love stories. We gravitate towards stories. Stories are what help us find a greater understanding of our own lives. And tarot is a storytelling tool. When you get a tarot reading that is really effective, I think what it actually does at the heart of the reading is connect you to your own story. Instead of seeing your life as a series of random events, you begin to see yourself as the hero of your own journey. And you begin to see that the things that happen to you, the experiences that you have, are not just happenstance, but they're part of some type of larger plot. And you, again, have the autonomy to be the interpreter of that story, to decide how that story takes shape, and to decide, above all else, what the meaning is behind that story and how all of these seemingly disparate elements of your plot, how do they connect to form something greater? You are the one that has the ability to come up with that narrative and to come up with the meaning in that narrative. I really, really believe that. And I believe that when we do start to take ownership of our own narrative, that's when life becomes magical. So as we go through this first season of episodes and as we focus on tarot for self-discovery, we'll look at a variety of ways that tarot can be relevant for you as you learn about yourself and as you navigate your life. I hope that you will find some of them interesting. I don't want to give everything away right off the bat, but I will tell you a few things that you can look forward to in upcoming episodes. The first couple of episodes after this initial episode that we're doing here today are going to focus on something that it's a theory that I've kind of come up with on my own, and it has been obviously peppered by knowledge that I've gained from various tarot teachers and books and knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. But it's essentially a theory that I have come up with, which is that there are 8 cards in the tarot deck that I think of as the core cards. Now, there are 78 cards in the deck as a whole, Every single one of them are relevant. Every single one of them contribute something to the structure of tarot. But I think of these 8 cards as being kind of like, when a house is built, there are certain walls that are load-bearing walls. All of the walls are important, but the load-bearing walls are sort of keeping everything else together. And that's, to me, what these 8 cards are in the tarot deck. They are the springboard from which everything else is centered. And when you can get really a good understanding of these 8 cards, it helps everything else click into place more naturally for understanding the deck as a whole. So that is what we will be looking at in the next 2 episodes. We're going to split the 8 cards in half, so we'll look at 4 cards in one episode and then 4 cards in another episode. I'm so excited about that. I do think it will be very helpful to you if you're a beginner, and if you are more down the road in your tarot studies, I hope it will give you some new ways to think about the cards and to frame your understanding of them. My plan right now is to release episodes every other week. At this point, to be totally honest with you, I'm so new to this podcasting thing. As I'm recording this, I am still trying to get a feel for the logistics of how I'm going to do everything. But I can tell you that for right now, the best way to stay up to date and to get the newest episodes of the podcast would be to subscribe to my mailing list. I am going to be sending out notifications as soon as new episodes go live. So you can visit my website, which is carriemallon.com, and you will see a box right there on the homepage in which you can plug in your email address, and I will keep you up to date on future episodes and other things going on in my world. Your time is valuable, your attention is valuable. I know that the internet is a loud place with a lot going on, so I want to thank you again for being here with me, listening to this episode, and I look forward to speaking with you again in our future episodes. I hope you will find something interesting. I hope you will find things that will be thought-provoking and inspiring for you as we embark upon our future episodes together. The remaining episodes will have a bit more structure than this one. As this is our introduction, I wanted it to be more loose. I wanted to just give you guys the chance to get to know me a bit and for us to set the course for where we're going from here with the podcast. The remaining episodes will also likely be a bit longer than this one. This one we're about to wrap up pretty shortly here today, but the remaining episodes I'm thinking will be probably closer to the 45-minute mark. I cannot wait now that I have done this first introductory episode. I feel like I've kind of broken the ice a little bit, and I'm looking forward to talking with you again next time. So I will be in touch soon, and we will start our exploration of the core 8 tarot cards and how they pertain to your journey of self-discovery. I'll talk to you then.